Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome back to our weekly Torah class on the portion of the week. This week's portion is that of Balak. It's in Numbers, chapter 22, verse 2, and it goes till Numbers chapter 25, 25, verse 9. And this week, I'll go quickly through a brief synopsis of the portion I do every week. It starts with 962, but we're going to really be focusing on the end of the portion. But just a brief synopsis of this week's portion is the Jews are now basically about 39 years after they left Egypt. They're making their last trek to the land of Israel. And on the way, they encounter a number of nations that refuse to let them go by and pass through. And they go to war with them. They have no choice. And they destroy them. They win the wars. And they're now just before their final stop on the way to Israel. And the king of Moab, who's now seeing what's going on and that the Jews are defeating all the enemies and so on, so it's now very afraid for their own territory. And the king of the Moabites was a man by the name of Balak, and he sent a number of messengers to a certain diviner, if you want to call him, a prophet, a non-Jewish prophet, an evil man. His name was Bilam, and he had the power of to curse. He was able to curse, and his curse would have an effect. So Balak hired him to curse the Jewish people, so that to eliminate the threat. And Balak plays a little hard to get, so to say. He doesn't come so quick. He asks God for permission, and God tells him not to go, so he refuses the invitation. But then they insist, and he asks God again, and God says, if you want to go, go, but you'll say what I put in your mouth. That's what you're going to say. And indeed, he goes there, and he has a whole incident with his donkey. As he's moving towards the Jewish camp, he leaves his own town, wherever he lived, the donkey suddenly sees an angel. And we're told that animals have a certain sense that humans don't. They're able to see angels. And they don't, because if we would see angels, we would go a little, we would not be able to contain such a thing. We'd not be able to live on with that kind of revelation. We would lose our own sense of equilibrium. We wouldn't be able to maintain ourselves in the face of such revelation. But animals don't have that problem. So he sees the angel on the way. He's blocking the way. The angel and the horse, the donkey starts going to the side, crouching under Bilam, and Bilam doesn't know what's going on. And he starts hitting the donkey, and it becomes a whole... And suddenly, Bilam's eyes are open. He sees the angel. And the angel tells him, forewarns him again, that when he goes to Balak, he should do only what Hashem says. Comes to Balak, and they bring the offerings, they make sacrifices, and Bilam begins to open his mouth, and instead of cursing the Jewish people, some of the most beautiful blessings emerge from his mouth. Some of the things that he said are the things that we mention in our prayers every single day. So it's quite amazing what happens here, a turn of events, like a total transformation. He wasn't transformed, he remained the same evil Bilam, but he was forced to become a source of blessing for the Jewish people. And he foretells the coming of Mashiach. Some of the most amazing prophecies are coming from the mouth of this evil guy. The sages tell us that Bilam had the power of prophecy equal to Moses. That's how great the prophet he was. Although he abused it to everything. He abused the power of prophecy to do bad things with it. Anyway, Balak sees that Bilam is, this is not working out exactly. Instead of cursing the Jewish people, he's only blessing them. So he kind of gives up on him and doesn't go back home. Who needs you? But before he leaves, he comes up with a strategy. Before he leaves, he tells Balak, you want to destroy the Jewish people, here's how you do it. Get them to behave promiscuously. Because God hates immodesty. That's one thing he can't tolerate, is promiscuity. Send in a few of your girls into the Jewish camp and let them seduce the Jewish men. You do that, you're nothing to worry about. God will be angry, he'll destroy them, and that's the end. And that's exactly what he does. He sends into the camp the Midianite women, the Moabite women, and the most unbelievable thing happens. And this is what I want to read to you. We're going to read this together, and we're going to talk about this on a legalistic way. Let's get the story, okay? Turn to page 981. 981, chapter 25 of Numbers. You with me?
Yes.
981.
Yeah.
Israel settled in Shittim, an area in the plains of Moab. Chapter 25. Their overconfidence after their successful campaigns against the Amorite kings and the excessive booty they plundered made them lose some of their sense of discretion. The people began to frequent the marketplaces Balak had set up according to Bilam's plan. Within a short time, the men began to stray with the daughters of the Moabites. The Moabite girls invited the people to the feast offerings of their gods, and 157,200 of the people ate of the offerings and prostrated themselves to their gods on the urging of the Moabite girls. Whenever a Moabite girl would seduce an Israelite man, and they were on the verge of carnal relations, the girl would take an idol out of her garment and tell the man to worship it first. The Moabite idol was named Baal Peor, the master of bearing. For their worship, they worshipped it by bearing their fundament and defecating in front of the idol. This is the way they worshipped it. Thus, through Bilam's scheme, Israel became attached to the Baal Peor. God became angry with Israel and unleashed a plague against them, which struck the innocent as well as the guilty. We're going to read a little bit more. In order to stop the plague, God said to Moses, take all the leaders of the people and assemble them at a court to judge those who worship the idol. Witnesses are usually required to try idolaters, but here the guilty parties sin privately in the Moabite tents. So in order to enable the judges to convict, and sentence them, I will roll back the cloud over the guilty people, and the sun will shine on them directly. So kind of like a miraculous type of situation. Stone those found guilty and hang them before God facing the sun, so that everyone can identify them clearly and learn not to imitate their deeds. Then God's anger will be removed from Israel and the plague will cease. The 157,200 guilty Israelites were exposed, tried, and convicted this way. Moses then said to the 78,600 judges of Israel, each of you must kill 2 men who became attached to Baal Peor by stoning and hanging them. This was one very bad day for Israel. Now look what happens. This is the most shocking event. So we got the story, right? They sinned, They were judged, convicted, and sentenced. Got it. Now comes a man, an Israelite man. This is the focus of today. An Israelite man, Zimri, the son of Salu, came and brought the Midianite woman Cosbi, the daughter of Tsur. He brought a Midianite woman to his brethren, who were assembled before the eyes of Moses. They were all there in the presence of Moses. So he brings this Midianite woman with him. He confronted Moses in the sight of the entire congregation of the Israelites. Moses forgot the law regarding what should be done in such a case, and since he seemed powerless to stop the insurrection, the loyal Israelites started weeping at the entrance to the tent of meeting. They all cried. Moshe doesn't know what to do. Imagine he stumped the rabbi, right? Here is a guy doing something so egregious, and Moshe forgets what to do. He went blank. So they all start crying. Imagine. What he did was terrible. This man had carnal relations with this woman and made it public. Moses' inability to act now contrasted sharply with his strong and decisive reaction to the sin of the golden calf. In fact, however, God made Moses forget the law in order that Aaron's grandson Pinchas could rise to the occasion and earn the distinction he deserved. What does Pinchas do? Pinchas, the son of Elazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, saw what Zimri did and said to Moses, "Didn't you teach us that if someone sees a man having intercourse publicly with a Gentile woman and is overcome by righteous indignation, he may warn him, and if he does not stop, execute him without trial?" Moses replied, "You are correct. If you qualify, then since you remember this law, you deserve the honor of fulfilling it." So Pinchas arose from the congregation and took a spear in his hand. He went after the Israelite man, Zimri, the son of Salu, into the tent, warned them that he was about to kill them for their act. And miraculously, Zimri and Cosbi did not disengage, for then he would have been forbidden for Pinchas to slay them without trial. Miraculously, he pierced both of them with his spear, the Israelite man through his reproductive organ and the woman Cosbi through her reproductive organ. And Zimri did not cry out for help. More miracles happened there. Pinchas lifted them up on a spear, and they did not slip off. An angel lifted the frame of the doorway to the tent so he could carry them out as they were so it would be clear to all that he killed them justly. When they saw Pinchas carrying the couple on his spear, Zimri's sympathizers wished to attack him. So the plague intensified in order to kill these sympathizers. Perceiving that the plague had suddenly intensified and many people were quickly dying, Pinchas cast Zimri and Cosbi to the ground and prayed to God to stop the plague. Thus the plague against the Israelites ceased. Those who died in the plague numbered 24,000. Once Zimri's uprising was quashed, the judges were able to finish executing those guilty of idolatry. And the next portion, God's going to reward Pinchas for this heroic act. This is an unbelievable event that happens in front of Moses and the people at the end of their sojourn in the desert, just prior to their getting ready to go into the land of Israel. Any questions so far?
In a Bible's literature kind of context, the Balaam's donkey is a very important figure in literary history. However, somehow I must have repressed this entire thing because this is truly horrific.
It is horrific.
It's horrific and graphic. Incredibly graphic.
Well, the Torah doesn't give us the whole graphics. The Bible, the biblical part is only the bold. The bold words are in the Bible itself. But the commentary, the Talmud gives us the rest of the story. It is a horrific event, one that is hard to even imagine that such a thing can happen in the presence of the people we're talking about, Moses, Aaron. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And this was a leader of a tribe. This Zimri was a leader of the tribe. He wasn't a nobody.
The thing it raises for me is, in our current time, we have lots of Jews who are worshiping idols of all various kinds. And the nature of God's reaction, admonition, or curse even, is, at this moment anyway, is less clear. But clearly this is an offense against God. That is so.
This is horrendous. This is
that
egregious, the worst kind of event. Two things. Two of the worst sins were violated here. Adultery. I don't know if you want to call it adultery, but they were having relations,
sex in public.
Relations with women they were prohibited to have with. They would succumb to that, and in the process succumb to idol worship. So just imagine, and they paid the price. You're talking about a lot of people that were, guilty and convicted and sentenced. It was a tragic moment for the Jewish people.
God's response is not just to execute the guilty,
because
he's throwing a plague against the people.
That's right, but what's incredible here is that Bilam was the one that praised one of the great blessings, and I said before that we say it in our prayers, is this exact point about the Jewish people, how modest they are, and how careful with modesty they are. And then he goes, the same guy that sees that beauty in the Jewish people says that's their secret to success, and therefore you have to undo that, and if you undo that, God will strike them. And he's a schemer. And unfortunately, he was successful. Let's talk about this story for a few moments because there's a lot in here. So what happens over there? Let's recap. This man by the name of Zimri comes before Moses.
How are you doing, Myra?
Good, thank you. He comes before Moses and he brings the Midianite woman with him. Hello. Hi. He brings the Midianite woman with him. You have a yarmulke? Let's get him a yarmulke. Oh, yeah. Okay, let's do this. He brings the Midianite woman in front of Moses. And the commentators tell us like this. That when he came to Moses, he brought her to ask Moses, am I allowed to be with this woman? And if you say no, who permitted you to marry Tzipporah, which was also a Midianite woman? Think about it. Who is Tzipporah? Who's Moshe's wife? A woman by the name of Tzipporah, Jethro's daughter. Who was Jethro? A Midianite. So he said, you're going to tell me that this woman is prohibited to me, but she is permitted to you? And then he goes and does what he does, as we just learned. Pinchas takes action, and that's the story. The question is, what's the answer to that? We don't find anywhere that Moshe answers this question. Why was Moshe indeed permitted to marry Tzipporah? She's a Midianite woman. So Rashi explained.
His wife wasn't even Jewish.
He married a Midianite woman, the daughter of Jethro. So 1 second, let's don't ask questions yet. Give me a chance. I'll answer all your questions before you even ask them. Rashi says there's an obvious difference between Moshe and this. When did Moshe marry Tzipporah? He married her before the Jewish people even left Egypt, which means before the Torah was given. And back then, before the Torah was given, all Jews really were not considered legally Jews. They were all part of the regular society. We were all Gentiles before the Torah was given. So then he married a Gentile. What's the problem? After the Torah was given, all the Jews became Jewish in one mass conversion, and she was part of that. So she also converted when the Torah was given, just like all the other people converted, because we were all Gentiles before, in a way, legally. So there's no problem. Moshe was allowed to marry her without even a question. There's no halachic issue here whatsoever. She was Jewish at the time when he married her, after the Torah was given. Not when he married her, but when the Torah was then given she converted. So what is Zimri asking? A stupid question. You're telling me that this woman is prohibited. Why is your wife permitted? What kind of whether Zimri wasn't an ignoramus. He was one of the leaders of the tribes. See, he knew a thing or two about halacha, the difference. It's so basic difference. It's not even a catch, a trick question here. It's a basic, obvious difference between Moshe's wife, who became Jewish at Sinai, and Zimri. Zimri's this girl that he brought in front of this Midianite woman who was clearly not Jewish at the time. What's your question? And if there's something else at hand here that's not so obvious, for which reason Zimri felt that he has a good question against Moses, that maybe Moshe, after everything, should not have been permitted to marry Yisro's daughter, we don't find anywhere in the Talmud or in Moshe's words to him an answer to his question. The question is a double one. The question sounds so ridiculous. The comparison between her and her is just not there. And if there is something there, then tell us what it is. Let Moshe address it. So we got that problem. There's another question over here. You hear this? And this is very interesting. We know that Moshe was a Cohen. Moshe was a Cohen. Some opinions say that he was a Cohen from all his life. Some say he was only a Cohen for 1 week, the week that they inaugurated the temple. But either way...
How could he not be? I mean, Aaron was a Cohen.
Right.
So how could Moses not be a Cohen? It was his brother.
No, Moshe was not a Cohen according to some opinions. It was the Cohen status started only from Aaron. God chose Aaron to be the high priest, and his descendants would be Cohen. But some say that Moshe, there's an opinion that says that Moshe too was a Cohen, chosen by God to be a Cohen. Now we also know that a Cohen is prohibited, not allowed to marry a convert. A Cohen is not allowed to marry a convert. So the question now becomes, indeed, even if you're going to tell me that Jethro's daughter, Tzipporah, Moshe's wife, converted at Mount Sinai, that doesn't answer the question, how was he allowed to be married to her? A convert is prohibited to a Cohen. And if Moshe is a Cohen, how does he have the right to get married to Tzipporah or to stay married to her?
Obviously, because he wasn't a Cohen until the Torah was given.
He was a Cohen, and then...
And when the Torah was given, the whole status of Cohen didn't exist.
Right, but then he became a Cohen.
Yeah, but then he was already married.
So
the marriage was grandfathered in. It's like he became a Cohen after the fact, and she converted at the same moment the Torah was given.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, that's a great argument for saying that the whole legacy of being a Cohen does not exist until the Torah is given. That status is acquired only at that point. You weren't born a Cohen. At least they weren't born Cohen because the whole status didn't exist until the Torah was given.
Okay. So you're onto something, but let's analyze this. So there's two things we can say over here. First of all, before we get to the question, to the answer, why was Moshe allowed to marry her? There were two questions that we asked. What kind of silly question is this man asking Moshe? The comparison between the Midianite woman and Moshe's wife is just not there. Moshe converted her when Mount Sinai happened. So some answer that indeed this was his question. Even if she was converted, which he knew, still you're a Cohen. How can a Cohen marry a convert? That was his question. And that's fine. That's a good question indeed. But then the question is, why didn't he answer that? It's a valid question. And if it's a valid question, the man, even though he was an evil, terrible person, maybe he deserves an answer to that question. What is the answer indeed? And even if he doesn't deserve the question, an answer, you and I do deserve it. So it would be nice to understand the legal permission, how was Moshe, who was a Cohen, allowed to marry his wife, which was a convert? You got the question?
Yes, not the answer, though.
No, they didn't give you the answer.
Because the rabbi doesn't play like that.
Your question about the brothers.
So one possible answer is an interesting detail. If you will remember, in the week prior, a few weeks ago, we learned that Moshe complained to God that he can't handle the Jewish people all by himself. He needs help to lead them. It's a lot of people. It's a large job. He needs help. So God appointed 70 elders, right? And some of his prophetic power was bestowed upon those 70 people. And then we read that there were two people that began to prophesy. And the wives of these two new prophets one day were getting into a conversation between themselves. And they said, our husbands began to prophesy. And Miriam and Moshe's wife, Miriam was Moses' sister, and Moshe's wife Zipporah overheard this conversation. And Zipporah said to these two women, "Oh, yeah, I feel bad for you. Your husbands became prophets. You're never going to be with them anymore. They're going to separate from you. They're going to divorce you." Remember that story?
Can you repeat that, please?
I was saying that these two new prophets' wives one day got into conversation. And they're saying, our husbands became prophets. They were proud, right? My husband became a prophet. This is they were very proud about this. They were very happy that my husbands were chosen to become prophets of God. So Tzipporah overheard their pride, their conversation. She said, let me tell you, let me let you in on a secret. It ain't such a pleasure. It ain't such a picnic. Because he's never going to be home. He's going to separate from you. He's going to become holy. He's going to become one with God. He's going to marry. Basically, they married God. You can, wait. They're going to give you a divorce. In other words, Moshe divorced his wife.
Did he formally divorce her?
Oh, yeah. And Miriam heard this. So she went to tell Aaron, Moshe would divorce his wife Zipporah. They didn't know about it. And now they they found out about it. And that's why they were speaking Lashon Hara about Moses, and God made Miriam break out with leprosy as a punishment for speaking gossip. It's all in the 4 portions before this one. In other words, indeed, Moshe divorced his wife, separated from his wife. So the question, how was Moshe? Maybe this is a good answer. How was Moshe allowed to marry this woman? Because she was a convert? Indeed, he did not. He separated from her. And he was not married to her anymore. So there's no problem anymore, right?
Yeah, except Zimri is no prophet.
Zimri was no prophet.
Exactly, so it's not really a case.
Why? He was asking Moshe, how are you allowed to marry a convert? What's the answer? He wasn't married to her. He actually had separated from her. So that's a pretty good answer. Well, our question is, what?
Divorced her, but not because she was a convert.
Oh, that's the problem, right? First of all, the reason that he's separated from his wife, we're told, or even if he divorced her, was not because he was a Cohen and she was a convert. It's told to us as a very different reason, because he had to always be prepared to speak to God, because he was a prophet, and he suddenly had to, God can just appear to him, and that way, if he would be married, sometimes he wouldn't be pure. If he would have relations with his wife, he wouldn't be pure till he went to mikvah. What happens if God wants to talk to him 10 minutes later? So he's not be able to, because he's impure. So he had to separate from his wife because of that. And that's the reason why he had to divorce her, not because she was a convert. Had he not been the prophet, he wouldn't have been able to stay married to her. So the question that this Zimri is asking Moshe, who gave you the right to be married to Tzipporah, is a valid question that still stands. And we need to get the answer to that. How indeed was he able to be married to her? You get how we're going with this? You understand where we are? Okay. So the answer we still need the answer. How was Moshe allowed to be married to a convert? So some say, and this is a good answer actually, the law is that a high priest is not allowed to marry a widow. Right? Not allowed to be married to a widow. He has to marry a virgin. That's the law in the Torah, a high priest, not a regular priest. Now, the Torah, the Gemara talks about an interesting case. What happens if a regular priest gets engaged? Now, before we get talked about engaged, let me give you a little introduction. In ancient times, how was marriage organized? How did marriage happen? No, I'm not talking about that. The actual formal marriage was in two phases. We learned it in the Gemara that we're learning now. Right. First, you would betroth the woman, which was legally married. She became legally married to you, but you didn't bring her to your home yet. You didn't consummate the marriage till basically a year later when you made a chuppah, the marriage canopy. So it was two phases. First, you gave her the ring and said, you are betrothed to me in front of two witnesses. Then she would go live with her father and prepare for the formal marriage. And sometime later, they would have a chuppah, married, and then she would go live with her husband. But during that period, in between the betrothal and the chuppah, she is considered married to him. So now imagine this case. Let's go back to the story here. A regular Cohen who is allowed to marry a widow. It's only a high priest who's not allowed to marry a widow. Right? So let's imagine a regular priest gets engaged, falls in love with a widow. Second marriage, no problem. Did the right thing, there's no problem. And after he did the first phase, he betrothed her. Before the chuppah was able to happen, they appointed him to be the high priest. Now he's the high priest. The question now becomes, is he allowed to formalize the marriage with the chuppah? Now she's a widow. Now he's a high priest. A high priest is not allowed to marry a widow. So does he have to walk away from this, give her a divorce, and never go to the chuppah and just find someone else? Or what do you do in this situation? What's the status here? You got the question? The Gemara says, the Talmud answers this question and says, he's allowed to formalize the marriage. He doesn't have to divorce her. Why? Because we learn from the language in the Torah that what is the high priest not allowed to do? He's not allowed to do the first phase of marriage as a high priest to a widow. But once that happened already as a regular Cohen, if later he became the high priest, he's grandfathered in, like you said, right? The marriage is done. It's already after the fact. He does not have to divorce her. So it's very possible to say that the same applies to Moshe. What did happen by Moshe? He married Yisro's daughter before the Torah was given. He was allowed to marry her. No problem. Now he becomes a Cohen. So he marries the convert legally. Not a problem, right? Because he's not a Cohen yet. Thus suddenly he becomes a Cohen. Does he have to now divorce the convert? He married her legally. It's not that he married her while he was a Cohen. He married her before he became a Cohen. Later he became a Cohen. So it's the same case as the high priest that became a high priest after he married his widow. So you don't have to divorce then. So here too, Moshe doesn't have to divorce the wife. He's allowed to be married to her. The only reason he had to divorce her was because he was a prophet. But from the point of view of him being a Cohen, there's no legal problem. Because he was already married to her before he became a Cohen. So the marriage is grandfathered in even once he became a Cohen.
Again, no relevance to the Zimri situation. One, Zimri's not getting married. Two, this whole thing is like unsavory to the maximum extent. Zipporah was living in her father's house. Moses was living there also, but there was nothing going on.
No, he wasn't. Why was Zipporah living in her father's house? When are you talking about?
when Moses was a shepherd for Jethro.
Yeah.
Okay, he was out with the sheep. He was doing whatever he was doing.
Yeah.
Right. Zipporah wasn't she living in her father's house?
Then yeah, sure.
Right. So she was living in her father's house.
Right.
Father was supervising his daughter.
Yeah.
Okay. They weren't having sex out in public. I mean, it's like no comparison here at all from God's standpoint.
I'm talking about afterwards. I'm talking about once the Torah was given.
No, but I'm saying is the whole God could have diverted Moses if he wanted to and not have him marry Zipporah. God was acting in Moses' life.
That's not the point. The point is
I
he
understand.
chose the Zipporah. He becomes a Cohen. Is he allowed to now be married to her? This is a serious legal question. This becomes a legal question. Yeah.
Do the parents of either have any rights?
Parents of who?
Moses or his Miriam?
Rights to what? What do you mean rights?
Marriage. Do you have to get their approval to marry? You think?
Not legally, no.
No, not legally. Okay.
So this is maybe a good answer. The question that Zimri asked was a valid question. If you're telling me I'm not allowed to marry this Midianite woman, why are you allowed to marry a Midianite woman? You're a Cohen. She's also problematic to you. And and what's the answer to that? The answer is that when he married her, he wasn't a Cohen yet. And then later he became a Cohen, so he doesn't have to divorce her. That's wonderful, right?
Rabbi, at what period did you start having to get the parents' approval to marry each other?
What?
To get the parents' approval to get married to each other. When did that start, do you think?
It probably started way back when. I'm sure it happened in times of biblical times as well.
But not at this time.
This is biblical times, sure.
Okay.
It was at this time also. I'm sure parents were involved in the marriage of their children.
Well, Jethro certainly gave permission.
Sure, he gave
for
permission for Moses to marry her.
But Moses was not in Egypt. He was nowhere near his parents.
No.
He was he was an adult man living, 300 miles away.
The question now remains, and we're almost done. Why don't we find anywhere that Moshe answered this question? Very simple answer is, it's very possible that this man Zimri didn't feel that this was a correct legal. In other words, what's the answer that we gave? Why was Moshe allowed to marry her? Because how do we know? Because this is some kind of legal out, right? What's it? You're saying that we learn from a word in the Torah that a grandfather in marriage is permitted. It's not a clear thing in the Bible. If the Bible says that a Cohen, a high priest, is not allowed to marry a widow. And you're telling me that if he married her before he became the high priest, and then in between the first phase of marriage and the second phase of marriage, he became the high priest. So we learn from an extra word, not from an extra word, from the choice of words, we learn that when does the person become, when is a Cohen, a high priest, not allowed to marry a widow? It's only the first phase. But once he was already married to her, he doesn't have to divorce her, right? It's quite possible that Zimri didn't go along with that reasoning, that legal reasoning. He wouldn't have accepted it. So it wasn't such a clear-cut thing. In other words, yes, the halacha is like that, but you're talking about before these things were settled in the Sanhedrin, in the high courts, to formalize this law. It's possible that Zimri wouldn't have accepted that answer. So Moshe was right by not having to divorce her, because he was already married to her legally. and only later did he become a Cohen, and you're telling me that if later he became a Cohen, he doesn't have to undo the marriage, Zimri will say, where did you get that from? You're telling me from that word in the Torah that doesn't say clear. It's an interesting legalistic term that you're using to find that, to make this legal. I'm not so sure. He could say, I don't accept that legal reasoning. And at the end of the day, think about this. Moshe is going to answer him this legalistic, I don't want to call it a loophole, but this legal, this hair-splitting argument, so to say, that from the word yikach, which means the first phase of marriage, once the first phase of marriage happened already, and then only later you became a Kohen, you don't have to divorce. Who's giving this answer? Moshe is teaching it, right? Moshe is going to give him this defense to his marriage. He's defending basically himself. A rabbi cannot, imagine you come to me and say, are you allowed to, you can ask me for a legal ruling on a matter that I'm biased. I'm biased over here. I can't rule on something that I'm biased. That's a basic rule in all legal systems. So that's biased should stay out of it. He has to recuse himself, right?
But
Hold on. He has to recuse himself.
Yes.
So over here too, you have over here a situation where Zimri comes to Moshe and says, Moshe, you are married to a woman unlawfully. You are a Kohen, she's a convert. So Moshe is going to come over here and twist his fingers and say, split his and say, no, I'm allowed to be married to her because there's a word in the Torah that allows this. That it doesn't say clear, but this is how I understand it. Zimri does not lie. He's not bound by Moshe's reasoning, and he can say, you're biased. How can you even give such a ruling? So that's why Moshe didn't answer. We don't find that Moshe answers his question. And no one does, for that matter. All we find is that Pinchas picks up the spear and goes and kills him. But he asked a valid question. Why is there no answer to that? Why doesn't anyone bother telling the man? Imagine a student comes in here and says, Rabbi, what's the story of it? I have a problem. I need a legal answer. I need a halachic ruling. And no one gives it to him. You just kill him. What kind of behavior is that? Yeah, go ahead. What's your question?
I'm completely confused.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm completely confused for two reasons. One, first of all, Zimri doesn't want to get married. This isn't about, getting into
That's not the question. He's not asking for himself.
No,
He's
we're
asking,
backing into a
he's
different,
challenging Moshe.
he's challenging him over, okay.
Challenging Moshe's legal right to
on-
marry that woman. That's it.
The-
That's what we're talking about here.
And the preemptive argument,
Yeah.
and it's a preemptive argument, is that when Moses married Zipporah, he wasn't yet a Cohen because the Torah had been given and the whole status of Kohanim hadn't even been defined. Therefore,
But later it was defined. He's telling him, you became a Kohen, she's a convert. You have to divorce her. That's his argument. And what's the answer to that? Your answer is, it's already grandfathered in. That's not such as open,
neither
clear
God's
cut.
justice or man's justice is served by him divorcing Zipporah.
It's not a question of God's. First of all, who says if legally he has to do it, then he has to do it. If that's the halacha, you have to do it.
If that's the halacha,
Then that's what that.
but is there any halacha to this?
That's what he's asking him. You're telling me that I can't marry this Midianite woman. Fine, I'll accept that. But this Midianite woman, you are allowed to be married to.
This is my point.
Yeah.
Zimri's busy having sex out in public with the
I said
woman.
before
There's
that,
no question
forget
about
that
whether
a
he's
minute.
marrying her.
It isn't. No, he asked him, am I allowed to be with this woman?
Okay, where does it say this?
We said this before. Sure,
All right,
but that was his
be
point.
with her?
Yeah,
Be with her.
yeah.
This is the same as saying I want to marry the
Yeah,
woman?
it says a married. What's the difference? Be married. It's the same idea. Am I allowed to take this woman and live with her and be married to her? And the answer is no, right? Because she's a Midianite. And she said, wait a minute. Your wife is also a Midianite woman, and you tell him you converted her. You're a Kohen. How could you be married to a convert? Just a serious question. And no one answers it. What's the answer? The answer is some legal twist a little bit, right? We learn from a word in the Torah that it's only a retro. You don't have to, once you're married already and later you convert, you become a Kohen, that your grandfathered in. It's not an open, shut case. You're learning it from a word. Zimri can say, I'm not accepting that answer. And even if I am accepting that answer, not from you, You're biased to this question. You shouldn't be giving this ruling. And therefore, he doesn't give the ruling. He's not getting into that. He can't. The answer can't come from Moses to him. That's why Moshe doesn't answer.
It seems like sophistry.
What?
It seems like argument for the case.
Why not?
For the sake of argument.
Why?
Because
Why?
Zimri is just taking the opportunity to attack Moses on a matter not of relevance to Zimri.
It's relevance to Zimri. It is. Why not? It's very relevant. He's saying, and if okay, let's say
Because
it's
the
not
question
relevant.
of
Let's say
public
it's not
immodesty-
relevant to.
Public immodesty.
If I see you do something, and it's halachically wrong, and I ask you, who gives you the right to do this? What's the difference if it's relevant to me? It's relevant to you. I'm asking you a halachic question.
Let me back the question out differently. If the Midianite women had showed up in town, were having sex with the Israelite men,
Yeah.
weren't asking them to worship idols, just for having sex with them.
I don't
God wouldn't have
understand.
brought plagues, and God wouldn't
So
have
what?
killed all these people.
We're not talking about any of that. We're talking about one specific question that Zimri challenges Moses. You could say he had nefarious intentions. He wasn't really looking for an answer. We'll get to that. But he did ask a question that deserves a legal answer. There's a question on the table, and that has to be answered. You can't just walk away from it because he's not doing the right thing. That doesn't give Moshe a right to just walk away from a serious legal question. Why wasn't that answered? It's a good question he's asking.
Rabbi, what gives Zimri the authority to ask the question?
Any person can ask any question.
Any person?
You, even me. Anyone can ask a question. Why not?
Okay.
Anyone can ask a question. Even me, even you, and even if it's Moshe. It's not nice, it's not respectful maybe, he did it in a very nasty way, no question about it. But a question he did utter, and the question is a very serious question. And you need an answer. And we don't find that he answers it. So the Rebbe is trying to address this issue. First of all, what was this question?
What was the question?
The question was, who gave you the right to be married to a convert once you became a Cohen? And the answer is that he had the right, because it says Yikach. Yikach, as I explained before, means first phase of marriage. Once you did the first phase legally, you don't have to divorce afterwards, right?
Yeah, but that was retroactive. You're going forward 1,000 years to the Talmud to answer the question.
No, Moshe had that answer. What do you mean? That was the answer.
That was Moshe's answer.
Yeah, that would have been the answer had he given it. That is the legal answer to Moshe's permission to be married to Tzipporah. But why didn't he tell it to? Why don't we find that anyone answered that question? The answer is that Zimri wouldn't have accepted it. He doesn't have to accept such an answer. Why doesn't he have to?
Any answer.
No. A straight, open, shut case he has to accept. But he does. But this is a legal twist a little bit. This is the way Moshe understands the word in the Torah. Zimri could say, I understand it differently. And the word more important, he could say, Moshe, you're biased, you shouldn't have to. And Moshe knew he was biased. He has no right to legally answer this question, even though he's right with the answer, but he can't give the ruling. So we have all our questions answered now. What his question was and why no one answered it. But now we have to learn the lesson for you and me. Every story in the Torah is not just to tell us history, it's to tell us how to live our life today. What do you get from this? What's the picture that once I laid out the scenario, what happened over there, and he brings this woman and he challenges Moshe, who gives you a right to be married to your wife, in this whole terrible moment, and Moshe doesn't answer it. What do we get from this? It's a lesson in life. Have you ever been asked questions on moral questions? Have you ever been asked by other people moral questions? You did. I'm sure you have. Not every question deserves an answer. I didn't say has an answer. Deserves an answer. What do I mean by that? Sometimes people ask questions. Let's take Zimri as an example. What was Zimri looking for? What was his motive? What was his ultimate goal, let's say?
diminish Moses?
No. That's not what he wanted. He was looking to permit in his own mind, justify, rationalize what he was doing. He was looking for a rationalization for what he was doing. What was he doing? He was trying to be with this woman that he knew clearly was prohibited. He's not no way that he could have, but he's looking for a way to justify it. How do you justify it when what do people do all day long to justify their thing? They come up with all kinds of rationalizations. So imagine someone comes to me and says, am I allowed to eat something that's not kosher? Am I allowed to eat on Yom Kippur? Am I allowed to do this? Am I allowed to do that? They look for rationalizations, right? And I can see that they're not really looking for an answer. They're just looking to ask, and therefore find a way to rationalize their behavior. I'm not going to answer that. They're not looking for an answer. When someone's not looking for an answer, you don't give an answer.
Thank you very much.
What do? What should you do? What Pinchas did. Yeah, what Pinchas did. He put an end to the catastrophe. You don't get into a negotiation with a guy that's right there. All these. I'll give you an example. You have today in politics, Israel, for example. See, a lot of people ask, is Israel right for what they do when Hamas attacks them? They killed innocent children. Oh boy. They shot a rocket and a child got killed from it. It is a tragedy, no question about it. Children shouldn't die in the crossfire between Israel and Hamas. It would be nice if we can avoid that, without a doubt. But those that are asking the question, what's their intention? They're not looking for an answer. They're not looking to hear Israel's point of view. They're looking to make Israel look bad when they ask. That's all they're doing. You don't answer that question. You don't have to answer that. You throw them out of the room. You take a spear, I don't mean that literally, and get them out of there. You don't negotiate or get into a back and forth with a vicious anti-Semite. That's all he's looking for is to besmirch Israel. Now, I'm not getting into over here, should Israel try to for PR purposes, to clear the air and to try to explain itself? Probably they should. But I'm talking about in the world of truth. These guys are not looking for answers. They're looking to besmirch Israel. They're looking to rationalize their hatred to Israel. So they find a rationalization. I'm supposed to validate that by going into a negotiation. Did they do right? Maybe they were half right, 3/4 right. All you're doing is playing into their hands. Is all you're doing.
Rabbi, that's going on right now.
It's going on. I know. That's why I'm giving these examples.
The
that's what I'm giving these examples.
Yeah. But the real reason is to force the Israelis to restrain themselves, so that they don't defend themselves. It's basically
that's exactly what it's about. It's exactly what it's about. So we're going to get into a debate. Is the wife of Moshe allowed or not? That's not what Zimri is looking for. He's not interested in it. He's not really interested in Moshe's legal answer. He's interested in allowing Moshe closing his mouth in the face of such a open desecration of God's name, with Zimri taking this Midianite woman and being promiscuous. That's what he's looking for. He's not looking for Moshe is going to answer him, bring him into the yeshiva hall, and show him the halacha. He's not interested in that. That's not what he's there for. He's there to rationalize his behavior. So what are you going to do there now? Tell him no? Tell him what?
What do you think of
He's
Moses
not looking
said,
for a real answer. You don't tell him. You got to take a spear and get rid of it. What?
If Moses said, do what I say and not what I do.
Moshe doesn't say one thing and do something else.
We're not anywhere near close to that.
Moshe doesn't do other than what he says. He's not a hypocrite. God forbid.
No, Moses is on completely solid ground. The two cases have
Sure,
nothing to do with each other.
Solid
And
ground.
Zimri is just arguing.
That's the point.
It's a rationalization.
So Moshe could give an answer.
But
So
Moses has human qualities.
It's a deflection.
Moses is a man.
He is a man.
Yeah, but no, but
Therefore what?
Therefore, he's got a man's impulses, a man's actions. I heard a story, and the first time I heard it, I was going to ask you. Somebody said maybe Moses struck the rock because he did not want to lead anymore. And I never heard that one before.
I never either did. No.
It was a discussion group.
I think you're missing a point.
I'm repeating what I said.
No, the people, whoever says this,
Right.
the person, you say Moshe was a person. he was a physical human being, but he says that he was more godly than human. His top half was godly, his bottom half was human. Okay, whatever that means. The point that the rabbis are trying to convey is that he was not a regular human being. He did not have your impulses and my impulse. He didn't have any of that. He was a tzaddik, a holy person that was one with God. That's what he was. So he doesn't have impulses. He has to marry because that's the mitzvah in the Torah. And that the question now becomes, was he allowed to marry this woman? Who's the question? Who's asking this question? Someone that wants to himself be married to a Midianite woman. You going to go negotiate with such a person in public and give, and he's not looking for your answer. You'll give him one answer, he'll ask another question. He'll divert. It's a distraction. That's all he's trying to do, distract Moses. So don't fall into the trap of that distraction. Put an end to the desecration, which is what this man is doing in public right now, and causing 14,000 people or 24,000 people to die as a result of this plague. That's a lesson in life. You don't always answer questions. If you know that the question is not looking for an answer, don't answer it.
What do the rabbis say? Why did God kill the innocent along with the guilty here?
That's what happens in plagues. That's a separate question. It's a good question. I don't want to address it
I
now.
would take it back to Sodom and Gomorrah.
They were all guilty. But you can argue that 2-year-olds weren't guilty, right? Yeah.
Well,
It's a good question. We'll leave that for a different time. It's not. Sometimes you have to be forceful and not negotiate with people that are not looking to negotiate. They're not looking for an answer.
Dropping the big one here.
What?
Yeah. No,
And that's
the guy
why
was
Moshe
clearly-
doesn't answer.
It was nonsense. This guy was.
Because no
bringing
matter
nonsense.
what Moshe would have said, it wouldn't have been answered.
Right.
It wouldn't have been. He'll find a legal reason why Moshe is not capable of answering. Why he disagrees. He's this. He's that.
Kept going.
He's looking for rationalization for his bad behavior. Don't get negotiated. And put an end to the bad behavior. That's what you got to do. And God rewarded Pinchas. Tremendous reward. Next week's portion. He actually made him a Cohen. And he would testify that he was a good man, a man of peace. You'd think such a person takes a spear and hangs him out in public. It's a vicious guy, right? Not at all. But God said this was a man of peace.
Any comment about the amount of strength that God would have had to give Pinchas in order
Yeah,
to
this
spear
was a miracle.
2 people and raise
This is a
them over?
miraculous strength. And he was able to pierce them exactly where he wanted to pierce them, to show that they were guilty. It was one miracle after the other. We just read that.
Could you just summarize Pinchas in a couple of words, please?
Summarize Pinchas.
In a couple of words, yeah. He killed people, right?
He killed this man, this one man. 2 people, sorry, 2 people.
Why did he kill them?
Because they were engaged in a capital crime. They were guilty of a capital offense, of a capital sentence. They were
For having
promiscuous.
sex.
But
They were
It's
doing
sort of
this in a
human
way.
genitals.
They were doing this a way. They were doing something that was against all the moral code of the Torah, for which you get the death penalty. If you're in the act, while it's going on, you have the right to take action. Had they separated, he wouldn't have had the right to do it without a court case. These are legalistic laws. These are laws in the Torah. That if you see someone engaged in the act of promiscuous behavior with a Midianite woman, you are allowed to take action. It's not something you would ask the rabbis, could I go kill him? They would tell him no. But if you do it on your own, you can. It's an interesting law.
No, thank you.
The point is that that's what he did. He killed these 2 people, and he stopped the plague. But I'm not talking about the action of Pinchas. I'm talking about the action of Zimri and the question, how to deal with such people. You don't negotiate with such people. You know, you see, and you can detect that in 2 seconds, what this person is looking for. Some people are legitimately looking for an answer. Some people are looking for a rationalization. Their question is really their own answer. That's the answer why I'm allowed to do what I'm doing. You understand? Some people are asking questions. Some people are coming up with a rationalization. When someone's coming up with a rationalization, don't give it to them. by arguing with them and explain to them why they're wrong. You'll tell them one thing, they'll find some other thing. You got to just put an end to the behaviors, if you could. But negotiating with them and getting into a back and forth is never going to help if that's their intention. And that's what we learned from the story of Zimri. So we have the legal reason why Moshe was allowed to. What was his question? It wasn't who gave you the right to be married to her. Of course, there's a difference. They all became Jewish. I'm not in Torah. You're comparing. No, he wasn't stupid. That wasn't his question. His question why he was allowed to be married even as a Jew, because he was a convert, and you're a Cohen. And for that, we need to have an answer. We need an answer for me and you, for regular people that need to know that Moshe's actions were legally proper, but not to him. He could not be given that answer. First of all, he wouldn't have accepted it, and Moshe knew he wouldn't accept it, and that would be just a foolish engagement with someone that's looking to just ask. He's not looking for answers. He's looking for rationalization.
That's the takeaway. The takeaway is
Yeah.
that Zimri he wasn't the right person to receive this answer for all the reasons you just gave, and that you don't have to give.
Today's class, by the way, I mentioned in the beginning, but I want to mention it now as well. Today's class was given in honor of the yahrzeit of Yehuda Amram ben Eli Cohen, who's the father of Rajan Cohen, who's today's his yahrzeit. We thank Rajan for sponsoring this class in the Kiddush of yesterday, and may his neshama have an aliyah. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Who's the yahrzeit today?
Of a man by the name of Yehuda Amram ben Eli HaKohen.
Is he a member here?
His daughter is.
His daughter?
Yeah.
Whatever happened?